I never thought it would come to this. I always thought I'd be the one who mattered. But here I am, standing alone in the living room while my parents hand over $500,000 to my sister, Sarah, without a second thought. My mind races as I hear my mother's voice, sweet and proud, saying how Sarah's new business venture is going to be life-changing. My stomach churns. They don't know that I've been sitting on an empire of my own, worth over $11 million. Alone. My family doesn't even realize what I've built for myself. But they will. Oh, they will. I can't let this go on any longer. It's time for them to see the truth. The truth about me. The truth about what they've never noticed. I've been invisible to them for as long as I can remember, always overshadowed by Sarah, always second best. My parents have never really seen me for who I am, just as they've never seen the life I've built. Sarah, my golden child, the one they thought would carry the family legacy forward, was always their focus. She was the one they poured all their love and attention into, the one they said would make it big, while I quietly faded into the background. I was never good enough in their eyes, and for years I tried to accept it. When we were younger, Sarah would get the best clothes, the newest toys, and the most praise. She was the first to get her driver's license, the first to go to college, the first to get a real job. Meanwhile, I was stuck with hand-me-downs, second-rate opportunities, and the sense that I was just there to fill space. My childhood was filled with memories of watching my parents dote on Sarah while I sat quietly on the sidelines. I didn't mind at first. After all, I loved my sister. She was my role model, even if I felt like I could never measure up. But it wasn't until I started working on my own that I realized just how little my parents thought of me. I worked 2 jobs to pay for college. I didn't get the fancy loans or scholarships like Sarah. I fought tooth and nail to make something of myself, and when I graduated, I did it on my own terms. My parents barely acknowledged it. In fact, the only time they really paid attention to me was when they needed something. I helped them financially when they ran into trouble, even though they never asked for my help. But all of that was supposed to change. I had been planning for years to take back control of my life, and now the time had come. When I found out that Sarah was getting the $500,000, I felt a pang of betrayal deep in my chest. How could they do this? How could they just give away that kind of money without even thinking of me? My sister, who had never struggled a day in her life, was being handed $500,000 to start her business, while I had to scrape by for every penny I earned. I knew that my family thought I was just another quiet, unimportant member of the family, but I wasn't. I was so much more than that. They didn't know I had been making investments, building a fortune behind the scenes, keeping my successes hidden from them. I wasn't just a quiet, overlooked daughter. I had assets, property, stocks, and more. $11 million to be exact. My heart beats faster as I think about how they would react if they knew. But I wasn't going to reveal it yet. Not until the time was right. I knew that in order to get their attention, I had to make a statement. I had to show them just how wrong they were about me. They had underestimated me for too long. It was time for them to see the person I had become. The person they had refused to acknowledge. The person who had built an empire on her own. And when the day came, when they finally realized what I had, it would be too late. They wouldn't be able to deny it anymore. I wasn't the weak, invisible daughter they thought I was. I wasn't the one they could ignore or cast aside. I was the one with the power, the one who had the last laugh. The one who had been quietly working behind the scenes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I was about to show them that I had everything they would ever want and more. They wouldn't be able to take it back. They wouldn't be able to take me for granted again. And when they saw the truth, when they saw who I really was, they would have to live with the knowledge that they had completely misjudged me. The truth was, I was the one who had it all along. I spent the next few days in a haze of disbelief, trying to figure out how to approach this new reality. I couldn't stop thinking about the $500K Sarah was getting, how my parents treated me like I wasn't even part of the family, how my sister always seemed to have everything handed to her. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much they had taken me for granted over the years. I had worked so hard to get to this point, and they barely acknowledged it. It was like I didn't even exist in their eyes, except when they needed something from me. It had always been this way, hadn't it? They called it family, but it felt more like I was just another part of the furniture, invisible and ignored. I had spent years building my career, my financial stability, and yet here I was, still being treated like the failure, the second choice, the one who didn't matter. I didn't even get a thank you when I paid off their bills for them, when I helped them out of tight spots. Sarah, on the other hand, was their shining star, their golden child, their perfect daughter. I had always been compared to her, but I was never enough. I was always too quiet, too reserved, too in the background. Sarah was the one who always stole the spotlight. She had the charm, the beauty, the ability to manipulate people into liking her. It wasn't even her fault. She didn't ask for it, but she had it. And my parents, well, they couldn't get enough of it. It was hard to blame her, though. I knew how much they adored her. I just never understood why that meant I had to be overlooked. I thought I had come to terms with it over the years. I had built my life without them, relying on no one but myself. But seeing Sarah get that money, seeing them treat her like she was the one who deserved it all, it broke something inside me. I had worked harder than anyone. I had sacrificed more than anyone. And I was finally beginning to reap the rewards of my efforts. But my family? They still didn't see me for who I was. They saw Sarah. They saw the girl they wanted to see. The girl who never had to struggle. But I wasn't that girl. And it was time for them to realize that. I had my own power now, my own success, and I was going to show them. I wasn't going to keep hiding in the shadows. I wasn't going to keep pretending that I didn't matter. I mattered. And I was going to make sure they knew it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was the perfect moment. This was the time for me to step into the light, to reveal who I really was. The $11 million I had hidden away, the properties I owned, the investments I had made, all of it was about to come to light. And they would finally see what they had missed all these years. I had to be careful, though. I couldn't just throw it all out there. It had to be calculated, strategic. I couldn't let them think I was doing this out of anger. No, this was about me finally taking control of my life. This was about me showing them that I had something they couldn't ignore. And I was going to do it in a way that they wouldn't be able to deny. I started to make plans. First, I would need to bring up the money issue again. The $500K that Sarah was getting, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the message it sent. It was about how they had overlooked me once again. But I was going to make sure that they knew who was really in control. I had everything they needed, everything they had ignored, and I was going to use it against them. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. I was going to show them that they were wrong about me, and when the time came, they would regret ever thinking I was invisible. They had never seen what I could do when I wasn't held back by their expectations, by their favoritism. Now they were going to see it all. They were going to see the real me. And I was going to make sure that when they did, it would be too late for them to take it all back. I spent the next few days carefully planning my next steps. I couldn't just throw all my cards on the table at once. No, I needed to build this up. My parents had been underestimating me for so long, and I couldn't let them have the satisfaction of thinking this was just a reaction. This was calculated. This was a moment they would never forget. Every decision I made from here on out would be a part of the bigger picture. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had to confront them at the perfect moment. Not too soon, not too late. It had to be dramatic enough to make them realize just how wrong they had been about me, but it had to be personal. It had to come from a place of strength, not desperation. I knew exactly where and when the perfect opportunity would come. It was the family reunion. The one event every year where we all gathered together. Sarah would be there, of course, with her new business venture on display, her charming smile, and all the attention on her. I had to be careful with how I approached it. I couldn't let anyone suspect anything until the moment was right. The night before the reunion, I sat down with my lawyer, a woman named Rachel, who had been working with me for years. She was the one who had helped me set up my trust and secure the properties I had acquired over the past few years. Rachel had always believed in me. She had always known I could do something big, something that would change the way people saw me. I told her about my plan to reveal everything to my family, and she supported it. "Do it on your terms," she said. "They've had their time to act as if you don't matter. Now it's your turn to show them who you really are." The next day, I stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath. I was ready. It wasn't about proving something to them anymore. It was about reclaiming my place. I wasn't just the daughter they ignored. I wasn't just the sister they overlooked. I was more than that. I had earned everything I had. I had worked for it. And now they were going to see it. When I walked into the reunion, everything felt different. The usual chaos of family chatter, laughter, and awkward greetings were all there, but I wasn't the same person. I wasn't the quiet, invisible Emily anymore. I was confident, calm, and in control. My parents were at the center of it all, as usual, showering Sarah with praise for her business ideas, and all the things they had done for her. I could feel the tension building up inside me. I could feel the weight of what I was about to do. But I knew it was the right time. It wasn't just about the money or the properties. It was about showing them how wrong they had been. It was about reclaiming my power. And I was going to do it in front of everyone. I walked up to the table where my parents were sitting, and I could see the surprise in their eyes when they noticed me standing there, looking so different. They hadn't expected this version of me. They hadn't expected the confidence, the calmness. Sarah, of course, didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. She was busy talking about her latest business deal, about how she was going to revolutionize the market. I waited for the right moment and then, with all eyes on me, I casually dropped it. "I'm sorry, but I need to make an announcement." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at me, but it wasn't just my parents. It was the entire family. They had never really paid attention to me before, but now, they were all waiting for what I had to say. "I'm not just here to visit," I continued, my voice steady. "I wanted to let you all know that I own $11 million in assets. I have built that from the ground up, and I didn't need anyone's help to do it." There was a moment of stunned silence, and I could see the shock on my parents' faces. Sarah looked at me, her smile slowly fading as she tried to process what I had just said. "What?" my father finally asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and confusion. "How? How did you?" I didn't answer him right away. I just let the words hang in the air, the truth of them sinking in. I didn't need a handout. I didn't need anyone to give me money to start my business. I've been quietly building my own empire while you all ignored me. The room was dead silent now. My parents, who had never given me a second thought, were now staring at me as if they had just seen me for the first time. Sarah's mouth hung open, and she didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Emily they knew. This wasn't the girl who always took a backseat to her. This was a woman who had worked, sacrificed, and built something that no one had ever imagined. I could feel the power shifting in the room. It wasn't just the money. It was the recognition. It was the moment I had been waiting for. They couldn't ignore me now. "You've always seen me as the failure, the one who never quite measured up," I said, looking directly at my parents. "But now, you see who I really am. I've worked hard for this. And now you have to accept that I'm not the person you thought I was." My father opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. My mother looked like she might cry, but it wasn't the kind of tears I was used to seeing from her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy. It was the realization that they had made a mistake, a huge mistake. And it was too late for them to take it back. The silence in the room was deafening. My parents, Sarah, and the rest of the family stood frozen in shock, unable to process what I had just revealed. I could feel the weight of their disbelief pressing down on me, but I didn't waver. This was my moment, the one I had been preparing for all these years. They had treated me like I was invisible, like I was just another shadow in the background, but now, I was the one they couldn't ignore. I watched as my mother's eyes filled with a mix of guilt and confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For once, there were no words to cover up the years of neglect, the years of being overlooked. Sarah stood there too, her usually confident expression replaced by a stunned look, as if she had just been hit with a wave of reality she wasn't prepared for. My father finally found his voice. "This isn't possible," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. You've been hiding this from us all this time." His tone was filled with a mix of anger and disbelief, but there was something else there too, fear. Fear of losing control, fear of facing the truth they had tried to bury for so long. I could see it in their eyes. They were realizing that I wasn't the same person I had been when I left their house years ago. I wasn't the daughter they had pushed aside. I wasn't the invisible, quiet one anymore. I had built something for myself. Something real. And now they had to face it. They had to face me. "You never gave me the chance to prove myself," I said calmly, meeting my father's gaze. "You never thought I could amount to anything, did you?" My voice was steady, but underneath, there was a quiet fury that had been building for years. "I've been doing this on my own, and it's about time you saw what I'm capable of." Sarah, still standing there in stunned silence, finally spoke up. "You're lying," she said, her voice shaky but defensive. "There's no way you've done all of this. You don't have the skills, the connections, the knowledge to pull something like that off." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. I had heard them before. For years, I had been told I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong in the same category as Sarah. But now, I was proving that I didn't need their approval to succeed. "You've been wrong about me all this time," I said, my gaze shifting from Sarah to my parents. "I don't need your money. I don't need your connections. I've built my own. And it's more than you ever imagined." The room was still silent, except for the faint sound of my father's breathing, heavy with emotion. He had never been the emotional type, but now, he looked like he didn't know whether to be proud, angry, or ashamed. It was a look I had never seen on him before. My mother finally spoke, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "Emily, I didn't know," she said quietly. "I didn't know you were capable of all this." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of all the years I had spent feeling invisible to her. I had always tried to earn her love, to earn her approval. But it had never been enough. And now, when it was too late, she was finally realizing who I really was. "It's too late for that now, Mom," I said, my voice hardening. "You had your chance. You had years to see what I was capable of, but you never did. You always chose Sarah. You always made me feel like I wasn't enough." My words were like a punch to the gut, but they were the truth. And for once, I wasn't afraid to say it. The rest of the family watched in stunned silence, unsure of what to do next. This wasn't the Emily they knew. This wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter they had expected. This was the real me, the one who had spent years building something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. I had spent so long trying to gain their approval, but now, I realized it didn't matter. I didn't need their validation. I had already validated myself. My father, still in shock, tried to regain control of the situation. "This isn't the time for this," he said, his voice more authoritative now. "We need to talk about this later." But I wasn't about to let him brush this under the rug. Not this time. No, Dad, I said, my voice rising just enough to let them know I wasn't backing down. This is the time. This is the moment you all need to understand. I am not the failure you thought I was. I am not the person you left behind. I am someone you can't ignore anymore. I paused, letting my words sink in, watching as they realized I was no longer the person they could manipulate or dismiss. You've treated me like I didn't matter for so long, I continued. But now, I'm the one who's in control. And I'm not going anywhere. There was another long silence, but this time, it was different. This time, they were the ones who felt powerless. And I had everything I needed to finally take my place. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The tension in the room was unbearable. For a moment, no one spoke, and the silence stretched on. My parents stood frozen, unable to process what I had just told them. Sarah, still reeling from the shock, opened her mouth to say something but quickly closed it again. It was almost as if she didn't know how to react. They had always treated me like I didn't matter, like I was just a footnote in the story of their lives, but now, I had their full attention. I could see the realization dawning on their faces. They were finally understanding that I wasn't the person they thought I was. That I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. But they had underestimated me for far too long. My father, trying to regain control, cleared his throat and took a step forward. Emily, I don't know what to say, he muttered, clearly at a loss for words. You've done all of this without us. The words stung, but I didn't let them show. This wasn't about me being hurt anymore. This was about showing them the strength they had never given me credit for. Yes, I replied calmly, my voice steady despite the wave of emotions I was feeling. I've built this on my own. Without your help. Without your approval. I paused, letting my words settle in the air, giving them a moment to fully understand what I was saying. For years, you've overlooked me. You've treated me like I didn't matter. Like I was just some background character in your life. But now, I've made something of myself. And you're going to see me for who I really am. My mother, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. Emily, I didn't know. I didn't know it was this serious. I didn't realize how much you had accomplished. Her voice was filled with regret, but it was too little, too late. The damage had been done long ago. It's too late for apologies, Mom, I said, my tone firm. You had your chance. You could have been proud of me all along, but you chose not to. You chose to believe I couldn't do it. And now, I've proven you wrong. My father opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. No. It's time to stop pretending like everything's fine. It's time to stop pretending like I'm just the quiet, overlooked daughter who doesn't matter. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the person you can control or dismiss. There was a long silence as my parents exchanged glances, but no one said anything. It was as if they were finally processing the enormity of what I had just revealed. Sarah, still in shock, stared at me, her mind racing to make sense of it all. I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that her life, her carefully crafted image, was about to be shattered. She had always been the perfect one, the one they had always believed in. But now, I was the one in control. I could feel the power shift in the room. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one who felt powerless. I wasn't the one who was invisible. I was the one who held the cards now. I took a deep breath and continued. You always made me feel like I was just in your shadow. Like I was never going to amount to anything. But now you see what I've done. You see the life I've built. I did this without you. And now you have to accept that I'm not the person you thought I was. The room was still, except for the faint sound of Sarah's breathing, which seemed to get louder as the seconds ticked by. She was the one who had always been the star of the family, the one who could do no wrong. But now, it was my turn. I had worked for everything I had. I had earned every penny, every asset, every piece of property. And now, they had no choice but to recognize it. "This is my life," I said, my voice calm but strong. "And I've built it on my own terms. Not yours. Not Sarah's. Mine." For the first time in my life, I saw a flicker of understanding in my parents' eyes. They were starting to see me for who I truly was, not just as the daughter they had ignored, but as the woman who had fought tooth and nail to get where she was. The woman who had built something from nothing. They couldn't take that away from me. They couldn't dismiss me anymore. I had earned my place. "I'm proud of you, Emily," my mother said quietly, her voice barely audible. It was the first time she had ever said those words to me. And it wasn't the words themselves that mattered. It was the realization that, for once, she was seeing me. Truly seeing me. But it didn't change anything. It didn't take away the years of neglect, the years of being invisible. It didn't change the fact that they had never believed in me. And that was something I could never forget. I turned away from them then, my heart pounding with a mixture of pride and sadness. I had done it. I had finally taken control of my life, and I had shown them that I was not the person they thought I was. I was someone who deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized. And now they couldn't ignore me anymore. The days that followed the reunion were a whirlwind of emotions. I could feel the shift in the air every time I walked into a room with my parents or Sarah. It wasn't just the awkwardness of the moment, it was the tension of their realization. My parents, still processing everything, were starting to look at me differently, but there was something I couldn't quite shake. They didn't seem fully convinced, like they were still holding on to the old image of me, the girl they had always dismissed. Sarah, on the other hand, had become distant. At first, I thought maybe she was just processing, but the more I watched her, the more I realized she was trying to figure out how to regain control. She couldn't accept that I had finally done what she had always done so effortlessly, make an impact. I had built my wealth quietly, with discipline, and without their approval. The more time passed, the more I realized that it wasn't just about money. It was about power. The power to stand on my own, to take control of my life, to be seen for who I truly was. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like I was just taking up space. I was someone who had fought for everything she had, and now, I was no longer going to let anyone forget that. But even as I reveled in my newfound sense of strength, a part of me knew that this wasn't over. My parents hadn't fully accepted it yet. They had never seen me as a strong, independent woman before, and they needed time to adjust to this version of me. But I wasn't going to wait for their approval. I had waited long enough. I had earned everything I had, and now it was time for me to take the next step. I reached out to my lawyer again, Rachel, and we began discussing how to make my presence in the family business more official. It was time to stake my claim, not just emotionally but legally. If they wanted to be part of my life now, they would have to accept me as an equal. There was no more being the invisible daughter. No more being the one who had to work twice as hard to prove herself. I was ready to take the lead, and it was time to show them that I didn't need them to succeed. I was already succeeding on my own. A few weeks later, the perfect opportunity presented itself. My father had invited me to a family meeting, something he had never done before. It was as if they were trying to reassert their control, to make me feel like I still needed them. But I wasn't going to let that happen. This time, I wasn't walking into their meeting as the daughter they had always ignored. This time, I was walking in as an equal. I sat down at the table, my posture straight, my gaze steady. The room fell silent when I walked in, as if everyone was waiting for me to speak. My parents, sitting at the head of the table, exchanged a glance, but I didn't look at them. I looked directly at Sarah. She was the one who had always thought she could outshine me, the one who thought she was the only one worthy of their attention. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," I said, my voice calm but firm. "About what I want for my life and where I see myself. And I've realized something. I don't need anyone's approval anymore. I've built everything I have on my own, and I'm not waiting for you to tell me what I can or can't do. The words hung in the air, and I watched as my father's face shifted. He wasn't used to hearing me speak with such certainty, such authority. "What are you talking about, Emily?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "We're a family. We work together." "No, Dad," I cut him off. "This isn't about the family business. This is about me. This is about what I've built. I don't need you or anyone else to tell me how to live my life." There was a pause, and I could see the tension building between my parents. They had always been the ones to dictate the terms, but now the tables had turned. "I'm not asking for your permission," I continued. "But I'm telling you this now so you understand. I'm not your second choice anymore. I'm not the invisible daughter. I've made my own path, and I'm not asking for your validation. I'm telling you that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The room was silent. I could feel the weight of their stares, but I didn't look away. I wasn't backing down. "I'm taking my place in this family. Whether you accept it or not," I said, standing up from the table. "And it's time for you to recognize that I'm not just the daughter you pushed aside. I'm the daughter who's built something. And I'm proud of it." With that, I walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest, but a sense of calm washing over me. I had done it. I had finally claimed my place. I had shown them who I really was, and I wasn't going to let anyone forget it. It wasn't just about the money, the assets, or the business. It was about respect. It was about finally being seen for who I truly was. And for the first time, I felt like I had earned that respect. I wasn't invisible anymore. The days following that confrontation felt like a whirlwind. The weight of what I had said still lingered in the air, and even though I walked away feeling victorious, I knew that this was far from over. My parents, still processing everything, barely acknowledged me in the days that followed. It was as if they were waiting for me to back down, to apologize, to show some sign of weakness. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not after everything I had fought for. The longer the silence stretched, the more I realized that I wasn't just fighting for recognition from my family. I was fighting for the life I had built. They had always expected me to fail, to fall into line, to live in Sarah's shadow. But I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. I wasn't going to hide in the background. It was time for them to see the real me. The one who had worked tirelessly to get where she was. The one who had made her own path, without their help. And the longer they ignored me, the more I understood that they had no choice but to come to terms with it. My father had always been the one to hold the reins. He had built his empire, made his fortune, and expected me to follow the same path. But I didn't. And I wasn't going to. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how much power I held now. My parents might still be clinging to the old version of me, the one they had always dismissed, but I was no longer that person. I had found my strength, my confidence, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. A few days later, my mother reached out to me. It wasn't much, just a short message asking me to meet her at the house. I could tell by the tone of her message that she was trying to be cautious, like she wasn't sure if I would show up. But I had already made up my mind. I was going to meet her, and this time, things would be different. I arrived at the house, and when I walked in, I could see that my parents were both there, sitting in the living room. They didn't look surprised to see me, but there was a certain hesitation in their eyes, like they didn't know what to expect. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and palpable, but I didn't let it affect me. I had a plan. I had to make them understand that this wasn't just about money or assets. It was about respect. It was about them seeing me for who I really was. I took a deep breath and sat down across from them. The room was quiet for a moment, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. Then my mother spoke. Emily, we've been thinking a lot about what you said, she began, her voice softer than before. And we realize we've made mistakes. We didn't see what you were capable of. We've always had our eyes on Sarah, but that's not fair to you. I listened quietly, but inside, I was seething. It wasn't enough to just hear the words. I needed to see the change, to know that they truly understood what they had done. I'm not looking for an apology, I said, cutting her off gently but firmly. I'm not asking you to suddenly start treating me like I've always mattered. What I want is for you to recognize me now. To understand that I'm not the same person you used to know. My father shifted in his seat, finally looking me in the eye. I'm sorry, Emily, he said, his voice a little quieter than usual. I should have seen it sooner. You've always been capable. I didn't give you the credit you deserved. It was the first time in my life that I had heard those words from him, and while they stung, I didn't let them show. It didn't change the years of neglect, the years of feeling invisible. But it was a start. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze head on. It's not just about you giving me credit, I said. It's about you seeing me. Not as the second choice, not as the background character in your life. But as someone who has worked hard, who has built something on her own. I'm not asking for your approval. I don't need it anymore. But I am asking you to see me for who I am now. The room was still, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in my father's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He finally seemed to realize that I wasn't the same person who had once silently stood by, hoping for their approval. I had earned my place. And I wasn't going to wait for their permission to claim it. Sarah, who had been standing by the doorway, finally spoke up. I didn't know, she said, her voice hesitant, almost apologetic. I didn't know you had done all of this. I thought I was the only one who could succeed. It was the first time she had ever admitted that she saw me as competition. And even though it wasn't much, it felt like a victory. For the first time, she was acknowledging that I had succeeded on my own terms. I wasn't invisible anymore. You weren't the only one, I replied, my voice steady but firm. And you're not the only one who can succeed. There was a long pause, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly being seen by my family. Not for who they wanted me to be, not for who they thought I was, but for who I really was. And that, in itself, was a victory. The days after the family meeting felt different, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but I wasn't naive enough to think everything was fixed. My parents' acknowledgement was important, but it wasn't everything. It wasn't a quick fix for years of neglect, and I wasn't looking for one. I had taken the first step, but the road ahead was still long. I knew the real challenge would be maintaining my independence, proving that I wasn't just a momentary act of defiance, but someone who could continue to stand on her own. My parents may have seen me for who I was at that moment, but they would need to see me continuously. I wasn't just going to fade back into the background, and I wasn't going to let them forget again. That night, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led me to this point. The years of working in silence, the quiet nights spent building my future while everyone else assumed I was content with being the overlooked child. The long hours at the office, the meticulous planning, the sacrifices that no one ever saw. It was hard, but it was mine. And now, no one could take it away from me. As the days passed, I felt a shift in how I approached my interactions with my family. My father, who had always been the patriarch of our household, seemed more distant, but there was a new level of respect in his demeanor. He didn't talk down to me anymore. He didn't treat me as though I was still the daughter who would never measure up. And Sarah was still trying to figure out how to regain control. I could see it in the way she tried to make her plans seem more important than mine, the way she subtly undermined my efforts. She was still the golden child in her own eyes, but that illusion was cracking. I could feel it. I wasn't the only one who had changed. The family dynamic had shifted. It wasn't just about wealth or assets. It was about the space I was now occupying in their lives, a space they had never wanted to give me. But now, I was taking it, and they had to accept it. The following week, I decided it was time to take the next step. I had been quietly working on securing my position in the family business, building the connections that would make it undeniable that I belonged. The trust one had set up years ago, the properties I had invested in, the projects I had quietly managed, all of it had been part of a larger plan, a plan they hadn't seen until now. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was a player in my own life, and I was going to make sure that everyone knew it. I knew I had to prove to them that I wasn't just capable, I was essential. My meeting with Rachel, my lawyer, had given me the clarity I needed. It was time to make a formal statement in the business. It wasn't just about proving myself to my family, it was about making sure that everyone in the business knew that I wasn't someone to be overlooked. I was going to make sure that the family legacy included me, and not just Sarah. The day of the business meeting, I stood tall, confident in my position. My father had set it up, no doubt hoping it would be a simple transaction, a way to keep the peace. But I wasn't interested in peace. I was interested in power. As we all sat around the large conference table, my parents on one side, Sarah next to them, I felt an odd calm settle over me. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. I knew what I had earned, and I was ready to claim my place. My father started the meeting, speaking in his usual authoritative tone. "Emily," he said, nodding toward me, "we've been discussing the future of the business. We think it's time to bring you in more formally. Your contributions have not gone unnoticed." The words stung a little. Not because I was surprised, but because they came so late. It was the recognition I had longed for, but it came at a price. They hadn't seen me until I had built something they couldn't ignore. But I wasn't about to let that take away from the fact that I had earned this. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I want to make one thing clear. I'm not just here because you've finally recognized my work. I'm here because I've earned my place. I didn't need your validation to get to this point, but now that I'm here, I expect to be treated as an equal." Sarah glanced at me, her face tight, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She knew. "We understand, Emily," my father replied, his voice softening. "And we'll work with you to ensure you're fully integrated into the business. We're proud of what you've done." I didn't let his words affect me. They were just words, the kind I had waited to hear for years, but they didn't change the fact that they had ignored me when I needed them most. I had learned long ago that words were just that, words. Actions were what mattered. And my actions spoke louder than any words they could offer. The meeting went on, but I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about what came next. I wasn't just going to be a part of the family business. I was going to lead. I was going to take control in a way that no one expected. And when they saw what I was capable of, they would finally realize that I wasn't just the invisible daughter anymore. I was the one who had taken the reins, and they would have to accept it. This was my moment. This was my time. Weeks passed, and the tension between my family and me didn't dissipate. It wasn't that they didn't try, but the truth was, things had changed. I had changed. No longer the quiet, overlooked daughter, I was now in control of my own life, and I wasn't about to let anyone forget that. I had earned this position, not because they had given it to me, but because I had built it from the ground up. Slowly, I began integrating myself more into the family business, not just as an observer but as a leader. My father, while still trying to maintain some semblance of control, had been more open to listening to my ideas. My mother, who had always been the passive one, started to come around too, offering words of encouragement. But it wasn't the words that mattered anymore, it was the actions. I wasn't waiting for their validation. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I was already moving forward, pushing my vision, making decisions, and showing everyone, including my parents, what I was capable of. The more I took charge, the more I realized how much I had been holding back all these years. I had been waiting for them to notice me, to see my worth, but now I understood that I didn't need them to validate me. I had built something that was mine, and I was going to make sure everyone knew it. One day, about a month after the family meeting, I called a board meeting with the key players in the family business. It wasn't a big announcement, but it was my first time making my voice heard in a room full of influential people. As I walked into the conference room, I could feel the eyes on me, curious, skeptical, maybe even resentful. But I didn't let it faze me. I sat at the head of the table, as if I had always belonged there. I wasn't going to shrink into the background anymore. My father was there, of course, and so was Sarah, sitting at the other end of the table, trying to appear nonchalant but clearly watching my every move. The rest of the board members, some who had worked with my father for years, looked at me with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity. "Let's get started," I said, my voice steady and confident. It wasn't the first time I had spoken in front of people, but it was the first time I felt like I truly had something to say. The meeting went on, with discussions about future investments and the direction of the business, but this time, my contributions were not ignored. Every suggestion I made was met with thoughtful consideration, and my father even looked at me with a hint of respect in his eyes. I knew he was trying to hide it, but I saw it. I had earned it. As the meeting came to a close, I felt a rush of accomplishment. This wasn't just a victory over my parents, it was a victory over all the doubts that had been planted in me over the years. It was proof that I wasn't the second choice, that I wasn't the one who had to wait for someone else to give me a chance. I had built my place, and I wasn't going anywhere. After the meeting, my father pulled me aside. "You did well today," he said, his voice low and almost begrudging. "I didn't expect you to handle things so decisively." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a backhanded remark, but it didn't matter. I knew what he meant. He saw me now. For the first time, he saw me for who I really was, not just as his daughter, but as a person who had something to offer, someone who could lead. "Thank you," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm glad you noticed." He paused, clearly trying to find the right words. "You've come a long way," he finally said. "But don't think this changes everything." I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of gratitude. It was a smile of understanding. "I don't need everything to change," I said. "I just needed you to see me. And now you have." As I walked away from that conversation, I realized that I didn't need anything else from him. I didn't need their approval, their praise, or their validation. I had already validated myself. I had already built something that they couldn't take away from me. It was mine, and it was going to stay mine. And as the days passed, I felt more and more confident in my place within the business. Sarah, though still trying to assert herself, began to fade into the background. I could feel the shift in the family dynamic. They were no longer looking at her as the only one who could succeed. They were looking at me too. And that was exactly what I wanted. It wasn't just about power or money, it was about respect. And for the first time, I felt like I had earned it. The weeks that followed my first board meeting felt like a turning point in my life. The more I leaned into my new role, the more I realized how much I had to prove, not just to my parents, but to myself. I had always known that success wasn't just about money, but about power. The ability to carve out space for yourself in a world that wants to keep you in the background, to take control of your own narrative and say, "I belong here." That's what this was about. And every day, it felt like I was doing just that. Slowly but surely, my presence was becoming undeniable. My parents, who had once ignored my ambitions, started to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to fade back into the shadows. I had earned my place, and I wasn't going to let them forget it. My father, still the pillar of the family business, began to include me more in decision-making processes. At first, it was subtle. A mention of a new project here, a discussion about investments there. But I could tell that he was watching me more closely now. He was waiting to see if I would falter. Sarah, ever the spotlight seeker, was doing her best to assert her dominance in the family business. But I could see it in her eyes, the subtle jealousy, the way she tried to one-up me at every turn. It wasn't as obvious as it used to be, but it was still there. She had always thought she was the only one who could succeed, the only one who could carry the family name. But she had underestimated me, and now, she was starting to see the consequences of that. I wasn't just competing with her for attention anymore. I was competing with her for respect. And I was winning. As time went on, the dynamic in the family shifted. There was no denying it. I wasn't the quiet, unnoticed daughter anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. And I had a seat at the table now, whether they liked it or not. The more time I spent in the business, the more I began to realize how much power I had over my own life. I wasn't just managing investments or overseeing projects. I was shaping the future of the business. I was making decisions that would impact not only my family's wealth but also my own legacy. And that realization was empowering. I was no longer just working to survive or to prove my worth. I was building something that would last. One afternoon, a few months after my first major meeting, my father called me into his office. The call was unexpected, and for a moment, I wondered if he was going to take back his previous acknowledgement of my work. But when I walked in, he was sitting behind his desk, a serious expression on his face. "Emily," he began, looking at me with a level of respect that I hadn't seen from him before, "I've been thinking a lot about how things have been going lately. You've shown a lot of promise, and it's clear that you've got a head for business." I could feel my heart rate increase, but I kept my composure. This was a moment I had worked for. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I've been doing my best." He nodded, as if to acknowledge that I had indeed proven myself. "It's more than that, though," he continued, his voice softer now. "I've been thinking about the future of the business. And I think it's time for you to take on a larger role. We're talking about restructuring, and I want you to be a part of that." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. My father, the man who had never believed in me, was offering me a larger role in the family business. But I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready," I said, my voice calm and sure. "I'm not just here to take part in the family business. I'm here to lead." He studied me for a moment, and I could see a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Good," he said, standing up from behind his desk. "I think it's time the family saw that." That was it. The confirmation I needed. I had been pushing for this moment for years, but now it was finally happening. I had earned my place, and my father had finally recognized it. But as I left his office that day, I couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet victory. This wasn't just about the business or the power I had gained, it was about the journey. The journey of proving to myself and to my family that I was capable. That I didn't need their approval to succeed. I was already succeeding. And nothing could take that away from me. The shift in the family dynamic wasn't just a product of my hard work. It was a result of my persistence, my belief in myself, and my refusal to accept being overlooked any longer. I had claimed my place, and now I was going to hold on to it. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. And I knew, without a doubt, that I wasn't going anywhere. The weeks after my father's offer to give me a larger role in the business felt like a surreal blur. I had made it this far, but now the real work was beginning. I had always known that building something from the ground up would require more than just a few victories. It was about consistency, determination, and proving, day after day, that I belonged. The family business, once dominated by my father's decisions, was now mine to help steer. My father, despite the progress we had made in our relationship, still held a certain level of control. But this time, it was different. I wasn't a passive participant anymore. I was a leader, and I had earned that position through years of struggle, through making decisions that no one saw behind closed doors. At first, the board meetings felt like a battle. There were still whispers behind my back, murmurs from the older executives who had worked with my father for decades. They weren't used to me, and they weren't sure if I belonged. But I didn't let that stop me. Every time I spoke, I made my presence felt. Every strategy one presented, I backed it up with logic and research. Slowly, the doubts began to fade. I could feel the respect, tentative at first, slowly growing. My father started to include me in more important discussions. He still maintained his authoritative presence, but it was clear he was no longer the only voice in the room. I was starting to share that power with him. My sister Sarah, however, remained a challenge. At first, I thought she would come around, that she would see the value in working together. But I was wrong. Sarah, the once untouchable golden child, had become more guarded, more calculating. She tried to reclaim the spotlight she once had by undermining my ideas in meetings, questioning my every decision, as if I was some inexperienced newcomer. I wasn't surprised by this, but it didn't make it any easier. I had seen her behave this way before, but now, it was different. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I wasn't going to back down. One afternoon, as we sat around a table for a high-stakes meeting about an upcoming acquisition, Sarah couldn't resist the urge to challenge me. "I don't understand why we're pursuing this particular deal," she said, her tone sharp and dismissive. "It seems like a risky investment, and we don't have the financial flexibility to take such a chance right now." I had expected her to say something like this. It was Sarah's go-to tactic, question everything I did, make it seem like I was out of my depth. But I wasn't about to let it slide. "Actually, Sarah," I said, maintaining my composure, "we've done the market research, and the potential for high returns is there. It's a calculated risk, not a reckless one. And as for financial flexibility, we've been sitting on underutilized capital. This is the right time to move forward." The room was quiet for a moment, the tension palpable. I could feel all eyes on us, the others waiting to see how this would unfold. But I didn't back down. I wasn't going to give in to her need to diminish my ideas. "I disagree," Sarah shot back, clearly frustrated. "I think this is a mistake." "You can think what you want, but the data speaks for itself," I replied. "And I'm the one who's going to make sure it works." The meeting continued, and though Sarah kept trying to steer the conversation back to her point, the room began to turn in my favor. The executives saw that I wasn't easily intimidated, that I wasn't afraid to challenge her or anyone else. By the end of the meeting, we had secured approval for the deal. As the meeting broke up, I caught my father's eye. There was no smile, no outward acknowledgement, but I saw the glint of approval in his gaze. I had done it. I had stood my ground, proven my point, and come out victorious. Sarah, on the other hand, was visibly upset. She didn't say anything, but the tension between us was thick. I knew she was angry, but it wasn't just about the deal. It was about control. She had been the golden child for so long, the one who had been handed everything. But now the power was shifting. And she wasn't ready to accept that. Later that evening, as I sat in my office, reviewing the deal's details, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about winning a battle in the family business. It was about something deeper. It was about me finally taking control of my life, of my destiny. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore. I was creating my own path, and I was going to make sure it led to the future I had always imagined. I didn't need my father's validation anymore. I didn't need Sarah's approval. I had already earned my place. And that was something no one could take away from me. The days after the board meeting were filled with a mixture of quiet triumph and underlying tension. The win with the deal had been a clear victory, but I could feel the growing animosity in the air, especially from Sarah. She wasn't ready to admit that things were changing. She wasn't ready to accept that the family dynamic, the one that had always worked in her favor, was shifting. But I wasn't going to let her hold me back. I wasn't going to let anyone undermine the path I had worked so hard to carve for myself. My father, though silent about it, had started to show signs of begrudging respect. The more I took charge, the more I could see him quietly shifting his support to me, whether he liked it or not. But Sarah, she was a different story. I could feel her eyes on me, the passive-aggressive remarks she made in meetings, the way she would try to contradict my ideas, no matter how solid they were. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to regain control, trying to prove that she was still the one in charge. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't competing with her anymore. I had my own path now, and I didn't need her approval to succeed. A few weeks later, during one of our regular family meetings, the tension reached its peak. We were discussing an expansion opportunity in a new market, and as always, Sarah was vocal about her opposition to my suggestions. She had a way of undermining my ideas with subtlety, making them seem too risky, too unconventional. But this time, I wasn't backing down. "We've been playing it safe for too long," I said, looking directly at Sarah. "This is an opportunity to take a calculated risk, one that could pay off in ways we've never seen before." I could see her trying to formulate a response, but I didn't give her the chance. "This is the direction we need to go in if we want to stay ahead of the competition. We can't afford to be stuck in the past. It's time for change." I was tired of her undermining my decisions. I was tired of the way she thought she could still control everything. My father, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Emily's right," he said, looking at Sarah. "We need to consider this. It's a risk, but it's one worth taking." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling in. Sarah's face hardened, but she didn't argue. For the first time, I saw her yield. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show me that the power had truly shifted. I wasn't just someone who was there to follow orders. I was the one making the calls now. After the meeting, as I left the room, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was what I had been waiting for. This was the moment I had been building toward, the moment when I knew that I was no longer fighting for my place, but that I had already claimed it. That evening, as I sat in my office, reviewing the details of the new project, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. I had done it. I had fought for my place in this world, and now, it was mine to shape. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the quiet daughter who had to wait for approval. I was the one who was leading, and no one could take that away from me. The family dynamic had changed, and as much as Sarah hated to admit it, I was now at the forefront. It wasn't just about the business, it wasn't just about the power. I had finally taken control of my life. And that was the most important victory of all. My father's quiet acknowledgement, Sarah's reluctant submission, and the respect I had earned from the board were all pieces of the puzzle that were finally falling into place. But there was still work to do. The journey wasn't over. I knew that. But for the first time, I wasn't just working to survive in this family. I was here to thrive. And no matter what obstacles came my way, I knew I had the strength to overcome them. The future was mine to shape, and I was going to make sure it was everything I had always dreamed of. As the months passed, the changes in the family business became more and more apparent. I had found my place, but it wasn't just in the boardroom. It was in the way I carried myself, in the way I no longer allowed anyone to dictate my worth or limit my potential. Sarah, though still trying to hold on to the control she had always wielded, began to see the shift in power. She wasn't the only one capable of leading anymore. The subtle challenges she had thrown my way only made me stronger. Each time she tried to undermine me, I came back with more determination, more evidence that I wasn't just here to follow. I was here to lead. The family dynamic, which had always been dictated by my father's rules and Sarah's place at the top, had now become a shared space. And while I knew that Sarah still struggled with the change, I also knew that she was learning, albeit reluctantly, that this was no longer her world alone. The real test was not in the power I had gained or the position I had claimed, it was in the relationships I had with my family. Despite all that had happened, I still valued the connections I had with them, however strained they may be. My father's acknowledgement, though never fully expressed in the way I had hoped for years, had grown into something more sincere. I could see the pride in his eyes now, the recognition of my accomplishments, not as his daughter, but as a businesswoman in her own right. The power had shifted, yes, but the love, the respect, it had always been there, buried under layers of unspoken expectations and judgments. As I sat in the office late one evening, reviewing the latest figures for the company's expansion, I realized something important. It wasn't just about the business, the deals, or the acquisitions. It was about family. And even though I had fought so hard to earn my place, the true victory was in the way we had learned to see each other for who we truly were. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. My father and I, though still in our respective roles, had found a way to respect one another as equals, not just as father and daughter. We weren't perfect, and we still had a long way to go, but the tension between us had finally begun to dissolve. And Sarah, as much as she resented me, had started to acknowledge my worth, even if she didn't admit it out loud. As the months went on, I continued to push forward, but I did so with a newfound understanding. The struggle for success, for validation, was important, but so was the ability to forgive, to recognize the humanity in each other. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about healing old wounds and finding a way to move forward together. This story, my story, was never just about power or money. It was about finding the courage to stand up for what you deserve, to demand the respect you've earned, but also about understanding that love, in all its complicated forms, was the true foundation. As we all learned to see each other differently, to truly hear one another, it was clear that what mattered most wasn't the battles we fought, but the way we chose to rebuild. The real power came from embracing each other, flaws and all, and knowing that, despite everything, we could still be a family.